This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. Welcome. Thank you for joining. We're probably at 100 words already. I've been getting some feedback recently. I want to let you know that you are in for way more than 100 words. Just look at the length of these podcasts. It's well over an hour. It's a sarcastic name. It's just one of those things where you hear that in school. In 100 words or less, tell me this. I mean, now it's 140 characters. Just doesn't have the same ring to it. Anyways, the guest this week is Matt Carter, the keyboardist / guitarist of Emery, as well as one of the proprietors of BadChristian.com. I'll give you all the rundown on that in a minute. Let's get some business stuff out of the way. PropertyofZach.com. Go visit them, hang out on their site, become educated about independent music. They got awesome stuff. Just go there. Do it. Review the show. Pop on the website of the show, 100wordspodcast.com. Email the show at 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. And before we talk about Matt, there's been something that's been sticking in my head. I want to get it out. So I think we've reached a point where the idea of what I like to call the PMA culture, positive mental attitude. A lot of people see that out there in the world, whether it's like tattoos in their bodies, companies that have started up to promote that. Like it's awesome. I love the fact that you are being positive and you want that to exist in the world. People being positive. The only thing is, there's two thoughts I had on it. One, people that are doing it just as a sort of business thing, I get a little uncomfortable with that. I guess you could probably say the same way that, certain companies, make money off of other philosophical ideas, like, whatever, that's fine. I personally would never start up a vegan clothing company that is just t-shirts, It's just something I never personally have had an interest in. But when it's this idea that to be positive all the time, you're not. You cannot be positive all the time. I think there is some inherent value in looking at your emotions and trying to look at them in a positive light, but dwell in them, exist in negativity, exist in depression. Like, you need to fully understand that emotion before you move on from it. I think that and of course, a time frame in which to do that is completely arbitrary. It's different for each person. But I think just this idea that you must move from one thing to another thing to another thing and never slow down and never even exist in this emotion that may be negative, but hopefully once you've gone through it, you'll understand yourself better and you will know how to feel in that moment. So, because I think that there's just a lot of it is lost on like, oh, PMA, like that's what you got to do. You got to push through the bad stuff. And you lose the focus on the fact that you need to be living in those emotions. You can't just solve it with a catchphrase. That's just what I'm saying. I've just seen a lot of it out there, and I just want to make sure that people understand that there is inherent value in addressing those emotions. Anyways, let's move on. Got to get that negativity out of the way, right? The guest on the show is Matt Carter. He is from the band Emery. I got keyed in. I mean, I've known about Emery for a long time just because, as I will share in the interview, I watched them a long time ago and have enjoyed their records to varying degrees over the years. And they've just kind of existed in the world that I know, which is independent music. It wasn't until I tripped on this site, BadChristian.com, run by Matt and one of his other bandmates in Emery, as well as just an old friend, it kind of blew my mind. It was great to see what sort of dialogue they were having around the Christian faith in general and just life, like their transparency in who they are as people. And I don't know, there's something that's so appealing with the transparency of what people are and what struggles they go through. And I immediately dove into their podcast. And what's even cooler is that Emery right now is doing a crowdfunding campaign. And of course, who isn't doing a crowdfunding campaign? Like, everybody is. But they're doing it through their own site. They have rewards and everything else that you could possibly want. So go to badchristian.com. You can find out about the podcast, the book, everything those dudes have going on, plus the Emery crowdfunding campaign there. But anyways, that just got my appetite wet for talking to Matt. And going into it, I was actually really excited about this interview. I mean, I'm excited about all the interviews I do, but this one in particular, it was just kind of hitting me at a right time where I was like, man, I can't wait to dig into a bunch of stuff with him. So we talked for a long time. Matt is extremely candid, open, honest about everything I asked him. So here we are. Without further ado, I will talk to you afterwards. The perfect time across the board for me. So anyways,
good, that's great.
I usually start these things off with just like my own personal entry point to kind of, what you were doing or what you were doing musically and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to take you back to, let's see, probably 2004-ish, I want to say. So here, I at the time I was doing a lot of freelance music writing while also working at a record label called Century Media Records. So I think I got your record sent to me. It was either through the record label or via, a music review site or whatever, the record being The Week's End. So I listened to it, and I was obsessed with it for a good, few months. I was like, wow, this is really, and no slight against you, this is nothing that's very original, but the approach that you guys took, I was like, I don't know, this feels like vibrant and alive. So I went to see you guys when you played a pizza joint in Long Beach, California called D Piazzas. I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I want to say it was either just after you guys had released that. It was just like a little West Coast run, I think you guys were doing.
It might have been right before we released it. It was before we released it, I think.
Oh, no, I think, yeah, no, you're right. I think that's right. And it was one of those things where the venue is terrible, like in and of itself. It's just like a hole in the wall, pizza joint. But watching you guys play, it was one of those things where it was like, you had to fit 6 dudes on a stage that was meant to hold 4.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was like you guys seemed so, I guess, unprepared, like in general, but it was like because of that, and because the record that I was listening to was was honestly pretty polished. It was this like I just really enjoyed the experience because it was like you could tell you guys were working on being a band.
Right.
There was work that was being done. Do you remember that time when you guys were trying to figure out how to be a band and how to represent that record live and stuff like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've been playing music a long time and even doing these songs a while, but it was like figuring out how to sound good. It is hard. And so I feel like we'd been playing the songs a long time, but we really did focus at that time on being just aggressive live and having the show look fun and be engaging. I guess that's what we were focused on, and so musically I know that always suffered. And it's weird because now the later and later it goes on, bands wound up being all about the visual and the choreographed and the moves and all this stuff. But at that time when we were doing it, it was kind of new to us that you would really be aggressive and move around, and that's really what we were just trying to do to stand out at that time. So musically I'm sure it suffered for sure.
Yeah, and it was because I played in bands for years myself, so it's like anytime I watch a band play, you obviously take all these things into context where it's like, well, yeah, you're not playing through a real sound system and all these other things, but there, like I said, there was something inherently charming about it where I was like, oh, cool, like the record sounds perfect because that's how it's supposed to sound, but they're not there yet. But you could you could still hear where it's like, no, but they still represented the song as well. So it was one of those things where I immediately became endeared to it, as opposed to, because I'm sure you've had that experience where it's like you get a band's record, you listen to it, it's like pitch perfect, and then you see them live and you're like, you're not even 10% of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ray, I don't know if you've seen us since, but I don't know if we're a ton better than that now, to tell you the truth.
That's good. You're still.
If you read any YouTube comments, you can find people that agree with that, with it, just like it was back then, 10% maybe.
Totally. Yeah, you feel like you're very successful if you go higher than 10%.
Yeah.
You yourself, because you were born and raised on the East Coast, like in the South Carolina area, or am I wrong?
That's right. Yeah, Toby and Devin and Joel and our original drummer Seth all are from South Carolina, small town, same town.
Right. And so tell me about your family structure, like, mom and dad, brothers and sisters and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm an older brother, and I have a younger sister, and Toby also is an older brother. So that's been a big part of our culture is we're kind of dominant people, and we pick on younger people, like the younger members of our band and other bands on tour. We're a little bit older anyway, and so we've just kind of naturally always been that way. But older brother is a good description. That's a big piece of my personality, I think.
Right. I like it. I like that you immediately went with that identity in regards to the fact that you're just like, you know what? I like to pick on people. Like that's kind of, that's how you show your love.
Yes. And I think people typically get that in a loving way. Sometimes they don't, but those are the people that I don't get along with so well.
So the first time you try to pull something on them and they react badly, you're like,
yeah,
okay.
If you don't think it's fun to, you know what I mean? If you can't take yourself not that seriously and get picked on, then I'm not probably going to like you in the long run anyway. So I kind of like to feel that out early on in a relationship, you know?
Let's see how this goes. Okay. Well, looks like I'm not going to really care about you in a year.
Yeah, this is an uptight person, so if they're not going to like me, that's good to know that up front.
It is very good. You got to test the waters. Do you have that sort of Southern pride that is inherent with a lot of people that are obviously born and raised in that area?
Well, you have to be careful what you mean by that.
I do.
There's an extreme of Southern pride that would cast me in a pretty negative light, I'm afraid. But no, I do love the South. I don't have Confederate flags all over my bedroom currently or anything like that. But I do love the South. I do love being from there. I think the food's is the best in the world in the southeastern United States. And it's awesome. And I live in Seattle now, and I've been here since 2001. So I just describe it this way. I like where I live now, and I enjoy the South a ton. I'm glad to be away from it and miss it, as opposed to just always be stuck there in the rural South, which I love, but I'm glad I don't live there, and I love missing it and returning and visiting. So kind of best of both worlds in that sense.
Right, sure. Yeah, you like the broadened perspective that you have, but it's not
exactly.
You don't feel limited because of the area that you're in. But yeah, I mean, as you know from traveling and touring around, it's like, there's such an inherent, like, people are proud to be, like where I live in Southern California, people are proud to be from there, but it's a whole different level in the South.
Yeah, no, I'm very proud of the South. I love it. I think it's great. It's one of the most interesting cultures, in the country, if not the world, because it's like redneck people, and they have a ton of charm, and they're not known for necessarily even being smart or anything else, but they're just charming. They're fun. Everybody there is entertaining. Everybody there is got a good sense of humor. And when you go to like the Midwest, for instance, that's just not the case. I find everybody in the Midwest to be kind of, not everybody, but it's kind of a plain. To me, they feel plain.
Right.
And then the big cities in the Northeast have a lot of personality, and the West Coast got its own thing, but the South is where all the personality is, in my opinion.
You got a lot of stories down there.
That's right. That's all we do. We tell stories. We sit on the porch. We hang out.
Yeah. And so what did your parents do for a living as you were growing up?
My dad was a civil engineer, and then was wound up starting and owning a grading and paving business, so like a construction related thing. So they would do heavy equipment, earth moving kind of stuff. That's what I was supposed to do. He wanted me to take that business over, and I ultimately declined.
That was right. That was gonna be my next question, because usually especially when you enter the idea of family business, that is usually assumed, where it's like, okay, well, this is what you're going to do when you grow up. Was that always what your dad was obviously trying to groom you to be ready for?
Yes, I think so in a way, but at the same time, he was very encouraging and open. I think he had it in his mind that maybe my parents were ultra supportive, so I think they maybe even had it in their mind that I would do something even bigger or better than that. Too, like they were open to me being a doctor or something even beyond and moving up in the whatever that is. But I chose to do more alternative things, as time went on. And so they weren't pressuring of me to take over the business, but I spent time there. I worked there and learned some about that, but ultimately it just wasn't the thing. So
right. And so then as you started to your formative years, as far as like, high school and all that sort of stuff, like when did independent music start to kind of, peek its head into your life?
Well, I would describe myself also as a really slow developer, late bloomer kind of guy. I didn't go through puberty until I was about 16. Or anything like that, and I wasn't into any music. We didn't have, like where I grew up, we didn't even have punk culture at all.
Sure.
We didn't even have concerts. When I started playing, we didn't start playing music or anything until I was 16 or 17. I even started playing guitar, and at that time, I didn't know but about 2 people at our whole school that played guitar, and at the time, there were 0 bands. There was nobody in our whole high school that had a band at all. There were not any.
Right.
And so we started playing Weezer and Green Day covers and stuff in 96, and played a Halloween party and played the songs that like that. And that, as far as I know, that was the first band ever at our high school and the only one.
Right.
So so it was just a very rural culture there. And so, of course, like punk or independent music wasn't even something that I heard of like at all.
Right.
So we didn't get into music and indie music and stuff like that until college. When we were in college together, Toby and Devin and I, we got into skateboarding, and we were like age, I don't know, 20.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, before we even started skateboarding, we were 20 years old. You know,
right.
we didn't grow up with all that stuff. So
right.
all that stuff was when we introduced in college. Joey, we played in a band with then that we do BadChristian with now. He had an older brother and was from Charleston, which was a big city. Mm-hmm. So his brother kind of got him into indie music, and he knew what it was. So when we started college, Joey, our new friend, knew about all this stuff called indie music. I'd never even heard of Tooth and Nail, or I didn't know what indie music or punk music even was. Mm-hmm. And so back in that time, he would order CDs out of a lumberjack catalog. You remember that?
Oh, dude, I worked at an independent record store, and I did so many orders for the store through them. So for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we were doing. I mean, he was like, you got to check out this music. It's indie. And we're like, what is that? It's like emo. Like, what is that? Hardcore. And I was like, what do you mean? Like Korn?
Right.
I mean, like what is this? I mean, it's heavy. I've heard heavy music, like whatever, Limp Bizkit. What are you talking about?
Right.
What's heavier than that? And he's like, no, you got to check out Zayo. So basically all at once, he introduced us to, I would say, Pedro the Lion, Zayo, and Sunny Day Real Estate, and a bunch of Deep Elm bands, like all in the same week. So to me, that was all one category of just like weird ass music.
Right.
I didn't even know that kind of thing existed even at all.
Right.
Totally foreign.
Well, I'm sure it's interesting too, because like obviously being exposed to it at a later age, you're able to kind of understand it a bit more, not only just like contextually with like, okay, like even though, like you said, it's kind of all one big genre for you at the time, it's like you were able to kind of discern the differences rather than, when you're 14 or 15, it's like, you're like, is this good music? So yeah, you're able to kind of like contextualize it a little bit better, I'm sure.
Well, what was profound about it was just I had no clue, like, that the only music that I had heard was commercial radio music. That so far in my life, that was the only music that I ever heard, but I didn't know that was a narrow category. I thought that was encompassing of all of what music was. So it never occurred to me that they had these structures of verse, chorus, or whatever. I wasn't even aware that existed, but in no way could I have imagined music that didn't follow that. Like, it was not even in my brain as something possible. So when I heard Pedro the Lion, have like a really quiet, dinky little song, but then it had screaming in the background, that just, I didn't even understand what that could be. When I heard Zayo for the first time, it sounded like probably what my grandpa thinks our music sounds like, just noise. I didn't even know how to comprehend it.
Right.
And it was like, and so all that happened for us from that time until we got really into hardcore and emo and all this stuff. It just like turned on for all three of us, and we just said, this is it. Like, well, what kind of music? What do you mean? I don't know. All this stuff. So that all went into Emery. It was just everything, the pretty, the weird, the odd stuff, the heavy, everything. It was just all at once. We just absorbed it all. So we didn't have a background in it. It was just jumped straight in for us.
Yeah, and especially that's exciting too, because not only are you experiencing it, by yourself, but you have the community of people around you, and you're all getting into it at the same time. Like the energy is palpable. You feel it shooting between one another to be like, oh yeah, like this is exciting. Check this out.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because there wasn't a community around. I mean, we were still just a few individuals at a, small college that was all, just, Dave Matthews Band is the only thing popular.
Right.
Like that's what everybody else was into. So country and Dave Matthews and some mainstream rap was all that there was. So we were still really isolated, but we knew a few people, and we could travel into the city and for the first time ever go to see concerts or shows. I mean, back then we just called them concerts, I guess. We didn't even have the term shows for us. We didn't know.
Right.
And so we could drive up to Charlotte and see shows like I don't know if you've ever been there on tour or anything, to Tremont.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we would go to Tremont and see like solid state bands that would come through, and Hope's Fall was a local band at that time before they were signed.
Yep.
And so we saw Hope's Fall for the first time, and it was like, what in the world? So that stuff was really inspiring to us, but that was the first time we were probably 19, 20 years old, got into skateboarding and started going to shows for the first time. So there's a lot of people that put out really good music in our scene before before they're 20 years old, and we had never even encountered it till that point. So.
Right. You feel it's like you guys are kind of walking into the the middle of a movie theater, and you guys like
That's right.
an hour into the movie, you guys are like, "Hey, what's this? This is pretty cool."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So we've always been from the get-go the oldest people around. So even as a new band, we were the oldest new band. We were, the same age as all the old legacy bands. And then today to still be a band, I mean, we're going to be playing shows and we'll be 40 pretty soon.
Right. Which is, I'm sure in some respects is cool because obviously you have a little more life experience in.
Yeah,
you don't know, you don't have to make those horrible mistakes you make when you start touring when you're 16 or whatever. You can at least have that experience to hopefully help temper the being young and dumb stuff.
Yeah, I mean we're old and dumb. We still have to start there, which is even worse in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's true. You're just continually behind the curve. That's where you're at right now.
That's exactly. I told you. That's what I said. I always describe my life that way, from just going through puberty late and being small to getting into music late. And I think I got married not until I was about 30. I just had my first baby. I'm 34 now, and I just do everything late. And that's okay. I think I do everything well that I really get into, but it takes me a long time to get up to speed, and then I feel like I have a good grip on those things. So
Right.
That's just kind of my theme of my life so far.
Yeah, well, stick with it. It's been working for you so far.
Maybe I'll die late, too. That would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool. You're like, I'm 120. Yeah, I'm about ready to check out now, I guess. And so a lot of the bands that you were mentioning obviously are, from the Christian context. So was that just because, like, I think so many people, especially in the context of independent music, have such distinct memories of, like, whatever in the late 90s where obviously, Tooth and Nail and Solid State became such a power player within that music scene. And then, whatever, when you guys were around, obviously other labels were popping up. But was it that was like kind of the entry points as far as like Christian music was concerned? Like, was it introduced to you guys as like, hey, here's Zao, here's a Christian hardcore band, and like you kind of, splintered off from there? Or how did that?
I think the fact that some of that music was Christian was like really just crazy. Like I couldn't have fathomed that because I hate Christian music. I almost would say I still hate it today and always have. Like my friends, like I said, growing up they'd be into Dave Matthews or just the worst stuff ever. And then they would when they would do church music and stuff like that, it was just the worst music I have ever heard. It was everything to me, and I associated them as the same, like just acoustic, flip-flops, capos, just stuff like that. And I just thought, this is so dumb. Everything is so cheesy. And so I outright rejected, never listened to any, Christian music at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't even like, acoustic anything music. So I was into Nirvana and stuff as the radio and alternative stuff went already. So I was just already rejecting that kind of stuff anyway. So Christian music in a general way was something I always thought was, please, I will never pay attention to this because it is very stupid. And then when I heard people say that this band Zao or this band, people at that time would say every band was Christian, that I don't know if they really were. Probably not. Sunny Day Real Estate and Hopes Fall isn't a Christian band, but they kind of were tagged with that at that time.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's such an important point because I think it's like there was definitely a moment where it was like if a band exhibited like a Christian overtone in their lyrics or their visuals, it was like, oh yeah, they're a Christian band. And it's like, well,
yeah. But that was so new at that time that could even be a thing, and I think that contributed to me to thinking how crazy it was. Like, how could you do this, make music that weird, scream, be Christian? It was just like everything was so chaotic. So even the Christian belief wasn't something that made it cool or safe for me, but it just added to the head spin of like, doesn't make sense that it could be all these things at once. And that was what was really exciting about it. So I didn't care if any music was Christian or not. That was just one more thing. Like, you could be a vegan band. I was like, how could you be a vegan band? What does this mean? Like, people care about, wow. Yeah. I mean, it was just, scene. It was just being Christian had this element of it's a scene or some community to it. And that's what was really attractive more than like the belief structure. I never really cared about that as it related to the music.
Right. And so were you raised within a Christian household and like have that sort of slant as you were growing up?
Yeah, well, everybody in the South is a Christian. I think I heard of a couple people in Alabama that weren't Christian one time, but no, it's everybody in the South's Christian. So I grew up in I would call it a liberal Presbyterian mainline church. I wasn't part of evangelical Christianity, and then I would say I grew up as a Christian, honestly, to tell you the truth, because I just went and we just had it, but it wasn't something that was important to me or that I believed at all.
Sure.
And until I couldn't fight it anymore. I like I said, part of my story is that I was going to be a scientist and a doctor. That's kind of where I was headed in life. And so I was pretty much anti like the emotional and fruity part of religion in general. Mm-hmm. And this will sound really cheesy, I know, but I was totally intent on figuring out and learning enough to not believe in God eventually, because it sounded like horseshit that what people would ever believe in that stuff.
Sure.
And I just knew as soon as I could learn enough about science or the world, then I'd be I wouldn't have to worry about that anymore, because clearly the people that subscribe to it are not so smart, and I thought that I was smart. And then I had what you just would call, what a Christian would call getting saved, or what a non-Christian would say is just a spiritual experience. And I was like, oh shit, right. This is real, and I can't explain it a better way than that, other than I had a spiritual experience where I thought, oh, so that all that God stuff is true. And it was, communicated to me directly in a real way that I can't deny nor prove to another person. So at that point, and that was like separate from my upbringing, my church and stuff that I rejected. So at that point, I did become a Christian and a believer, but I didn't have I wouldn't say I really had that much background in it. So I've kind of always been.
Right. You were like, I put it this way, because my experience was similar in regards to, like, I always, you had a structure, you had a context for it. It's like, okay, whether you went to private Christian schools or, Lutheran high school, whatever, like you had you had a context for it, rather than, never going to church, never having any exposure to it. But you necessarily didn't ascribe to the beliefs because it was just it was a pattern you did.
Yeah, I just thought it was silly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, it became real, and so that's I believe it is true. I mean, I know it's true. It's confirmed to me in a supernatural way, so I wouldn't bother with explaining it.
Right.
But I'm also still a big science guy too. So that's just the way I am. I like to know how stuff works and
right. Yeah.
figure stuff out. So.
Yeah. You want empirical evidence, as they say.
I do. I like that. I just like knowing how stuff works, and music's the same way for me. I'm not the pure creative, like, express myself guy. I really understand music. I study it. I pay attention to it. I analyze it, and I just love how it works. It's so creative, but it's still so understandable and digestible to me. I like putting it together and composing and arranging, and that's really how I got into music, was just kind of studying it as a interest, a scientific style interest, I would say.
Yeah. You were interested in the nuts and bolts of
That's right.
of creating something, rather than like I've got this feeling I need to get out of my heart.
Mm-hmm, exactly. I don't have that at all. I don't have that at all.
Well, no, I mean, it's good. It's good you can be honest with that, because I think that there's obviously a need for people such as yourself, combined with other people that have, like, you couldn't be in a band with four other dudes that have that same mentality, because it would it would sound very cold and sterile.
Well, Toby's the opposite of that, and Toby and I are very complementary. So that's why our relationship works good, and we're able to achieve it. Like, so we have almost none of the same, like, real mentalities or skills as far as they do, so they really work out as a complementary thing. So he likes to understand nothing and do whatever he feels like,
right?
And then I support that really well in a different way, so it works out pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so as as you're going through high school and college, like you mentioned, once you started to become immersed in this music and stuff like that, and then once you started to communicate to your parents that the plan that was being set out, as far as, family business and, scientist, doctor, all that sort of stuff, like, how did they start to react to this weird stuff that you started to get into?
Well, like I said, they're really supportive, so that made it interesting, because they supported the silly stuff because they thought it was silly. And then at the point when we told them, all right, I just finished college, we all finished college, and we're going to move to Seattle and start a band, and that's that. And, that, like, they didn't oppose that, but they laughed at it. They didn't believe that was even true. Like, everybody we had girlfriends, and we told our families and everybody, and almost everybody told us, no, you won't do that. Like, we said, me, Toby, and Devin, and Joey, we're just gonna move to Seattle at the end of the summer and, like, start a band. And they just said, no, you won't. That's stupid. My dad said, son, you're not gonna do that. He said, one of y'all will back out, then the other one will back out, and that won't ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the attitude they had, and then it came that time to get up and go, and we pulled out of the driveway, and that was it.
Was there? It sounds like there was probably elements in your guys' head of calling everybody's bluff as well. Of like,
I guess. I mean, we were just kind of focused. Like I said, it was fast. It just happened. We said we're going to do it, and we didn't. We're kind of gamblers by nature, and I mean, we didn't have. I mean, it was already in my head that I didn't want to do this business, and I was on the music train, and we didn't look back. I guess it kind of fed into each other, you know. Once, if you have a bunch of people and they're all focused in one direction, there's nobody to bring it down to reality, because the reality was we weren't that good. We didn't have any plan. It was every possible odds were against us. I mean, we didn't have even our music yet. We had our band name, and we had practiced and jammed a few times, and that was it. And we just said we're going to move across the country. We saved $300 each. And we left. That was it.
It's like I just find it so funny, because it's like you hear that sort of, you know, that mentality in regards to like, yeah, I'm gonna come to LA and be an actor or actress, and it's like that obviously happens on an individual level, but for all of you to agree to do this, where it's just like that still happens. I guess people do that.
I don't understand it. I wouldn't recommend that anybody else did it, nor would I believe anybody else if they said they were going to do it. But I think we just had this collective ignorance that somehow there was no reality to it, and we just did it, and it also did work out. I don't know I can't really explain how that happened, because it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Right. Was it because, like you said, you had no you didn't have songs, you didn't have anything by the time you moved to Seattle.
And none of us had ever been to Seattle or knew even one person there. I mean, we had nothing. There was nothing. It was just, we're just going to do it. So we did tell ourselves, like, well, this is crazy. We could do it. We could move home in 6 months, and you know, we had all that, some thoughts of that, but we just never did. So
right.
I'm in Seattle today. That's, you know, the craziest part about that, and I don't have to go into this whole nother story because you can just get bogged down in it. But we left. We just said we figured out what time we were going to leave and what day and what would be our route that we were going to take to get out there. We said, all right, well, let's leave on. It was 2001. We said we were going to leave on September the 15th, and something happened weird, and Toby's like, hey, you know what? I don't have this after all. Let's go ahead and leave earlier. So we said, all right, we'll leave at 7 a.m. on September 11th. So we left at about 6:30 in the morning, September 11th, 2001, and drove right out of my parents' driveway.
Wow. It just like, well, we don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah, we didn't know about 9/11 at all. We were in North Carolina before, when it happened. So we were an hour from the house when 9/11 occurred on our trip to Seattle.
Right. That's crazy.
So we missed the whole thing because we traveled that whole week out there, and we didn't see the TV or the news. I mean, we listened to it on the radio, knew what was going on, but it's like this whole the biggest thing that ever happened to us as individuals happened within an hour of the biggest thing that's happened to our country in our lifetime. And so it's just really bizarre because those things totally overlapped, and our moving to Seattle for us totally overshadowed and was more important than what was going on in New York. We kind of missed the whole thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. You were sheltered to it.
It was a weird deal.
Yeah. Why'd you pick Seattle? Because like that's a really that's random.
It is random, but we like Nirvana. We thought that was cool, like alternative grunge, but.
I like it's so amazing because it's like it literally feels like it was just spit and glue and like duct tape, and you're just like, well, whatever, let's put this together.
No, that's exactly what it was. We didn't know anything, so we said, well, we got to leave here because there's nothing. But we didn't. Part of not being around a scene meant we didn't have any common sense. We didn't know, oh, you do it this way and then you do this. There was no. We weren't playing shows or anything, so. It wasn't like there didn't seem to be any apparent steps that you would take regionally. We just said, well, we got to go somewhere where people do stuff. So we thought Seattle was cool. Like I always liked Nirvana and all that kind of stuff. We said, well, we could go to New York. We could go to L.A. We could go to whatever, and said that New York and L.A. sound a bit scary. Seattle sounds cool. But turns out there was no more, grunge by the time we got there in 2001. It was, oddly enough, it was pop punk and ska and stuff like that. We were like, oh, weird, because we didn't like that kind of music at all. And we got there and the local scene was ska band. So the first shows we played was stuff like that. Right.
I'm sure. I totally get the idea, just the mental picture of you guys rolling up to a show and being like, hey, we're here. And then we're here to play some shows. Where you guys all play? Right.
That's exactly what we did.
It's so
and it was
good.
these skinny 17-year-olds playing ska. I mean, it was weird. That was who the shows we would get, like, oh. And we were these college graduate men trying to play slow, aggressive music with screaming in it. Because our music was kind of slow at that time. We'd have 7-minute songs and nothing fast. We had no up-tempo anything. So I'd credit being influenced by seeing some of those punk bands at the time who did what we thought fast beats, like we thought that was silly and cheesy.
Sure.
And so once we saw people doing it live for the first time, and we realized, oh, it feels good. That is fun. That's neat. So we kind of adopted some more peppy stuff and had catchier and faster stuff than we had before. So that was a big deal. Had it not been for that influence of getting to see pop punk music up front, then I don't think we ever would have had as near as digestible music as we did, because we were writing 7 and 8 minute long epic slow songs.
Simply geographically, from where you're from, it's since you were sheltered from so many of these things that are so inherent of the, being a part of a scene and, being so clued into whatever's happening locally, of like, oh, we can't sound like this band because there's already 2 other bands that sound like it from our area or whatever. Like, because you guys had no context for it, you were simply operating off of your own sphere of influence. Like all
right.
I mean, that's a very rare thing to come by, and like it's just so funny to have that all kind of like laid out to where you guys, once you were exposed to something else, you were just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. We're not going to do that anymore because of this, because we see how it's kind of out there.
Yeah, it was probably to our advantage because, having a Southern accent and playing music it was a lot different than what other people were doing, and looking different. We didn't know how to dress or anything. We had nothing. And we kind of had this trailer it was a big black 24-foot racing trailer, and we would sleep in it and lived out of it. And we'd pull up and try and play local shows in our first gigs ever, and nobody knew what was going on. And we would move around and do all this crazy stuff, and it just made no sense. But it was something about it, probably like you said when you first saw us, that it was something that was endearing about it. But it was just totally nonsensical. So I know we made an impression on everybody we ever saw, although it might not have been like polished, good, slick impression of good anything. It was just that this is out there, man, when people would encounter. So I think that helped people at least notice who we were and what we were doing.
Yeah,
so.
Well, because there's so much that's tied into that is the fact that, like, I mean, for one, you guys have a story, and it's not common. That immediately gives people something to talk about, especially, I mean, as the band grew, you had these, not just like we got in the garage and we started to piece stuff together, and that sort of, that story that happens. You guys clearly had a lot more going on that people could talk about.
Yeah, and like you said, our music isn't totally original or anything. So for you living in Southern California in 2004, seeing Emery do what we were doing then, you go, yeah, they're just doing this screamo post-hardcore thing or whatever. But from our point of view, I think we invented it. I mean, like, I didn't know. I mean, other people knew about it, but we didn't. I mean, we didn't know. I feel like we arrived at it from just a very bizarre point of view, and it wasn't like we were listening to even Thursday and Thrice or anything. I didn't know those bands. I mean, we did not know those bands.
Right.
I know that sounds weird, but we didn't even know them, and we just kind of arrived at where we arrived all really quickly, and coming from somewhere, and we didn't have that culture. So if we weren't original, we didn't know it. We thought we were. It felt original to us.
Right. So I just love it because again, I mean, you're painting such great mental pictures for me, where it's like you guys we're just like, dude, we just broke the damn mold on this. And then once you get out there and start to play with other bands, you're like, oh, okay, I see what's happening.
But I guess that's how that goes. We were just a little more isolated. I mean, I think everything's not a direct influence of somebody else. I think a lot of people were arriving at the same conclusions for similar reasons, that, oh, you can break the rules. You don't have to do this. You can even scream. But you could do pretty stuff, and it doesn't make you a pussy. I mean, you can do, people realizing all at the same time for the same types of thoughts, probably all across the at least country, so
yeah,
that's neat. And so it was just really lucky for us, because when we started doing our music and we would try to write songs and do stuff in South Carolina, it is unbelievable how much people hated it, because they would say, oh, you like, if Toby would get a guitar and sing something a little bit, they'd be like, this is so good, I like it. And then we would play loud, and they didn't like it because it was noisy. And then they thought it was okay, but then if we would scream, it was just so utterly offensive to any of our friends or families or anybody that could ever see it. They just were so upset that we would scream. Like these 20-year-old girls where we were in 2000 or so, they were so offended and hated screaming so bad. And then just a few years later, 5 years later, all these 20-year-old girls all over the country love music with screaming in it. It's just weird.
Where were all of you when we were in our yeah.
Because, I mean, it's just so weird because I thought, well, girls hate heavy music and screaming. And then it turns out just the silliest, it became poppy and cheesy, but we were doing it, like I said, when people hated it. So it's weird because bands now, not even now, in 2005, bands were starting up trying to do the screaming and the heavy, pseudo and, micro breakdowns because people liked it. But people hated it when we did it. I know.
Yeah.
But we just thought it was good.
Right. No, that's awesome. It's well documented, obviously, in your guys' trajectory as far as like where you guys went and as things grew. For you yourself, when did it start to become real where it's like, this is a thing. This is like people are paying attention to what we're doing, either on like, a smaller level or on a large level where it's like, you were playing Warped Tour and being like, this is weird. I didn't believe this to happen.
No, it was pretty much all at once. So we were having a hard time. We thought our music was getting good, and we made the Week's End on our own before we were signed. So we knew that was good. We knew it was. By the time we got there, we knew we were on the right track and people would get it. So we were frustrated for a little while until we got a record deal. And then once we got our record deal on Tooth and Nail with that, it started clicking probably when people were getting the pre-release and when you were hearing it and we were playing at that pizza place. It was interesting because people were paying attention all of a sudden nationally, but there was no measurable way to do it. We still hadn't done any real national tours that were anything at all. And then we got our first big tour when the record came out was the Tooth and Nail tour in 2004. Mm-hmm. And that was supposed to be headlined by Further Seems Forever, and they dropped off. And that started in Florida. So we drove from Seattle to Florida to start that tour. That was our first real tour of any kind. And so that first night we played there in Florida, which we'd never even been to or played in at all. And we were the opening band, the first band of the first night of that tour. And it was just immediately crazy. And people were singing the words, and it was full. The place was full, and we were the opening band, and people were already into us. So that was just like, it was overnight from feeling like, I don't know what will ever happen to, we're real. And we knew at that point that was it, because if people in Florida already knew the songs, and we hadn't done anything, we hadn't supported it, we hadn't done anything yet, and the record just came out. So we knew that was something, based on all the work we'd done so far.
Right. Was it? And so because of that, like you said, overnight sort of success, was it difficult to manage when things obviously flipped, when, the shows weren't as big or whatever? Like, how did that, because that's obviously a difficult thing when you've never, like you said, sort of quote unquote paid your dues, where it's like, oh yeah, I know what it's like to play in Omaha, Nebraska in front of 10 people,
Yeah.
Was it tough to manage for you guys?
The funny thing about it is you get used to whatever level of success that you have pretty much. And then you're always disappointed, like that newness wears off anyway, so you're going to be disappointed later if it doesn't continue to grow. So I would say it's like a measure of acceleration. Like the growth, big growth fast always feels good. And staying steady feels always a little frustrating. And if you even have dips in days of shows or even a bad show on the best tour ever, you'll feel down about it. And that's weird, but that's just the way humans measure stuff. So we've had tons of big disappointments in our career since, for sure. And I don't know how to measure that. I don't know if it makes any sense, because you can't complain when you have a bad show or even a bad tour or even a bad record. You can't complain about the people that are there or the people that did buy it or the people, even if we play for 80 people in St. Louis, which we've done before, the 80 people that you're there with, those are the good guys, So I don't know. It's hard to calibrate yourself based on what you really have and how important it is and stuff like that. But disappointment's part of the game for anybody, I think. Because
the common way a band obviously exists is the doing crappy tours for a long time and then getting to a point where it's like it builds a little. And so I know it's just always harder on bands when it's like sort of that sunburst of excitement and energy, and then being able, like, obviously you guys were able to get through it and exist because you are here where you're at right now. But it's Yeah, it's tough for bands to manage. I know that do have that initial exposure, and then like, all right, what do we do on our second record? Like,
yeah, yeah. Well, we worked a really long time before we got there, so it wasn't overnight success because we were
Sure.
like living in like I said, a racing trailer from 2001 to 2004. So those 3 years were super, super hard, and we did still play and tour, and we're all in at that point. We weren't doing it as a side gig. So we had 3 really difficult years. They were really fun too at the same time. And then it did all of a sudden it just tipped, just tipped right into what some people would call success, at least.
Yeah, for sure. So then, as Emery's touring life started to die down, and the idea of obviously transitioning into quote unquote real life, because people that have never toured, it's hard to explain the idea of like, well, you essentially just put your life on pause. Like you're living in an alternate reality, and that's where you're at. You're not a part of society, as it were. So as the touring life started to slow down, was it difficult for you to kind of transition into the fact that like, oh, I'm going to be in one place now for a little bit? How did that all sit with you?
Well, we've been touring still for a long time, and we slowed down gradually, which is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And to tell you the truth, I'm still fighting it, trying to I still don't live a normal life or anything as it is. So I don't. It's been hard, but for us, it's always come along with new things that we wanted to do, like having family and kids and things like that. So it's not like our band just declined and fell off and we had to stop. I've been super fortunate to just tour as much as we want, and it always still works out when we want to as much as we want to, and it's fine. So a lot of bands get in that situation where either one member wants to play every day and then one member says, I can't do it anymore because I'm married, or they decide to slow down a little bit together, but then they fall off because if you don't maintain, it's hard to maintain if you're not pushing it
right
all year round. And so that's what we've been working really hard as, balancing that. We've done some part-time work. We've done some other stuff. And it's always push and pull. Like, should we pick it back up and do more and more, Emery? Or are we okay at this level? Are we going to fall off? So it's been push and pull, but it's been pretty active the whole time. The transitions have been active. We've controlled them, I would say, which is nice. That's no bands get to do that. They're always forced in these tough situations, but we've been able to control our push and pull of how much we want to work, which is extremely rare.
It is a rare occurrence to have that happen, and especially like you said, you've been very deliberate about how the band's legacy continues, because it's like I don't think people would look at where Emery is today, and it doesn't feel, for lack of a better term, desperate.
Right.
Because it's like there are bands that you see out there that exist where it's just like they're solely acting off of like, dude, guys, remember that record we put out like 15 years ago? Like, it's still good, right? Like, don't you love that? And like, the legacy isn't, I presume it's a active consideration on you guys not to tarnish that legacy.
We're lucky for a lot of reasons, but that's one of them. Is a bunch of people that like us, they just tell younger people, or I think a lot of people that like us I don't know if they have younger siblings, or a ton of them turn out to be youth group leaders and they tell their youth group or what. I don't know, but it's been with the age of the fans kind of stays similar. Like, it's still 19 to 22-year-olds still like our music, and we still have now we have 32-year-old fans as well that have been there for 10 years. So it's bizarre, but we're obviously really, really, really thankful for it. And I don't know about legacy. Like, I guess that's important, and I'm glad you note it that way, because sometimes I feel like, well, would the noble thing be hang it up? But I don't think so, because I like it, and how many people have to be into it to justify it? Yeah. The new going forward. So I don't know. I think if we do it I'm not saying I'm a band dude for life and I'll tour no matter what and that's it. Like, we're family men, but we also get to make music. So as long as we can present that in an authentic way, I hope people will still, even if we tour once a year for 2 weeks and put out a record every 2 years, as long as we present that as what it is, I hope people can respect that and not see that as like shitty somehow.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a key point there, where it's like the when it feels desperate, I think it's when it's like immediately apparent that the members of whatever band are grasping at straws, that they literally don't have anything else to go on.
Yeah.
That's when it feels.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, that's when it feels like inauthentic, and you're just like, yo, you're just doing this because you literally, like, there's nothing else. Like, you are going to work at, whatever, a grocery store. You're going to do some sort of job that is meant for, ostensibly a teenage person. And that's it. That's all you got. So Yeah, it doesn't feel like that for you guys.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I was listening to your episode with Pryor. I thought that was awesome, the way he talks about he said he hates touring, and then he has to qualify. Well, I don't hate touring, but I'm trying to find out other stuff to do, and said he's not qualified to do anything other than music, but yet music business qualifies you for so much. I mean, that's exactly, I mean,
yeah.
We don't hate touring. We love it. I think he's probably, what was he saying? He got married and had kids right at the beginning of the Get Up Kids when they were going on, huh?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was much, I mean, I think it was right around their, the 4-minute mile full length. So yeah. He was in it.
But a lot of those things he said resonate, except for that one. Like, you could tell he had some contentious relationship with both his band and touring from the whole time.
Yeah.
For us, it's just been like a slow transition. But all the stuff he was saying, I thought was just really right on, as far as, well, I think I have a ton of skills, and in some ways people would never respect them because they sound like, oh, you're a band dude. And then at the same time, I find that people are unbelievably impressed by what you can achieve as an individual by being in a band and running your own thing. Sometimes that makes you look really, really good to the regular world too, that you've been able to do this or maintain this or whatever. So it's both ways.
Totally.
It's funny, the sets of skills that you have after being on the road.
Oh, constantly. It's something that is so, like you said, it's difficult to quantify, but it's like, hopefully if you hit a person that, is giving you a job interview that has some context for, it's like, being creative, when you say you're in a band and then you're able to be like, hey, we did all of these things and here's a laundry list of tours and whatever else. And it's like, oh, wow, like that takes effort. It isn't just like accidental that you accomplished all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. There's the little bumper credit things that you don't think about as an artist or a person that matter to the other people. Like, if you get on this or that on this chart, like, it's not that big of a deal because it doesn't necessarily mean you make any more money. But then when somebody else sees, oh, you're this or that, you're on the Billboard chart, or you are on iTunes this or that chart, and you probably know that from your podcast. I saw your podcast is listed on the noteworthy, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you get some rating there, it just happened because you were doing what you were doing. But then when other people look at it, they go, hey, that Ray, he's really on to something. He must really know what he's doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's really justifying for other people.
Totally.
When they see some other kind of notoriety that you have, even though for you, that just happened. You didn't you weren't pursuing that as a goal.
It's an added bonus. That's basically all it is. I think that transitions nicely to the idea of the because honestly, prior to getting introduced to you via the publicist that's obviously helping you guys out, I just wasn't aware of BadChristian at all as a website, and then it immediately just pulled me in, not only in the podcast that you guys are doing, but just obviously the way that you are presenting yourselves, and obviously that's what I mean, from in hearing you guys speak is what a lot of people are gravitating towards, because not only the honesty, but just obviously the transparency that you guys are, putting out there, I think is immediately identifiable. And like something that I know you've mentioned before within, whatever pop culture in general, people are gravitating towards honest things. Like you look at, one of the most popular stand-up comedians around, like Louis C.K., and it's like people love him because of the fact that it has taken him 30 years to become the person that he is, Yeah. And, I think in many respects, does it feel like obviously what you guys are doing with this is kind of like, oh, I feel like we've grown into our own and now we're able to express ourselves in that manner?
Yes, it's hard to express yourself, especially verbally. Like it's scary, especially talking on stage. But some of those things are really doing interviews and meeting people every night. You can get tongue tied really easy and say stupid stuff. But we have a lot of practice at that, as well as experience with just broad experiences in life that made us to who we are now. So we can kind of just do what we do, and it can be entertaining and enjoyable. Like a 55-year-old man in the South, he can sit and tell stories and entertain you all day long. It's because of all the time he worked on the farm, or was, went overseas and was at war, or having kids. You just, those experiences translate into a broad set of experiences, and then you can communicate. And if you're comfortable with yourself, then that's all it really takes to make other people comfortable. And that's what a good podcaster does, or Louis C.K. in his comedy. He can say anything, but it's because he's comfortable and inviting in himself, that it's not like he's just saying something obnoxious. That's
right.
Not the point.
Or he's like saying something to provoke a reaction, where it's like, because that's anybody at any age can do that. Like, how to press a button,
That's right.
But it's like, if you're able to press the button and hopefully quantify it with some either life experience or some context for why you're trying to press that button, that is what actually shows signs of maturity, as opposed to just like, well, fuck you, and that's it.
Yeah, and what good news that is, that people are so dialed into that pulse. I just love that so much, because I'd say in 2001 and back then, indie labels had this vibe about them that were just, this is real, this is it, and then there was still a lot of barriers to the market and stuff. So you had advertising, and it was even, things like Lumberjack, and then the internet, and then mp3.com. Mm-hmm. And then there was times there where people wanted to find out the new Tooth and Nail band or Deep Elm band, and banner ads at that time were still even kind of cool. Like, you just see a banner or go to a news site. And it's so funny that in the last 10 years, it's turned into, dude, do not market to me, period.
Yeah.
Like, now we're almost like a post-marketing thing now, and so you really can't do anything other than be real. And how cool is that just being real and not overly trying and overly marketing now works? That's great news for somebody like me.
Yeah, in the creative, people that are being creative can feel free to express themselves in an authentic manner, as opposed to putting up a character of oneself. And it's definitely and that's obviously exemplified in what you guys are doing with Bad Christian. And that's why I think people of all walks of life, whether they are religious themselves or whether they could care less about religion, there's value that can be kind of pulled out in the messaging that you guys are putting across.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we are. It's just, we've always lived in some kind of tension. Are you a Christian band? Are you not? Or what is this going on? So we were always just trying to do a band just because we like music and entertainment. Now, the other stuff's true, and it's part of who we are. And Bad Christian is kind of similar, even though it's even more focused on Jesus and Christianity. It's still, we're just going to keep a focus on entertainment, and we're still going to keep that focus. And just because we want to approach it from a different angle, I mean, there's a million churches and preachers and communicators and teachers, and they're awesome. That's what all their experiences in, and their lives are probably a lot better than ours, and they know a lot more than we do, and we support them. Let them do their thing, write the book, teach the thing, preach the sermon, and we're gonna do something else that we think is useful and productive and helpful. So
something that I know that you guys, in mentioning the are you guys a Christian band, that sort of stuff. Something that I know is it's just so perplexing about the Christian music industry, as it were. I'll cite a random example. So it's the band that I played in, we played a show at Chain Reaction with I'm fairly certain was a label mate at one point. There's a band called Born Blind, a hardcore band from San Diego. Anyways, so they were headlining the show. My band was not a Christian band at all. I myself am, but no one else in the band was, so that that wasn't an agenda. Having more than one person come up to me, because I was the guy that also sold the merch in my band, so it's I would sing and then I would run back and sell merch. Having a person come up to me and be like, hey, so can I read the lyrics? And it was I'd never been asked that question before, and it was yeah, and then and then asking without straight up asking, are you Christian? Are you saved? Having these veiled questions of I just was so put back by it, where it was oh, so you wouldn't find legitimacy in what I'm doing if I mean, I understand it's if we were obviously painting pentagrams on stage and stuff like that, I would get why a person would be a little leery about that. But I just found so many of these instances of the Christian music scene obviously cornered themselves off to not be exposed to any culture besides what was ordained by their group of friends or whatever is considered approved. And I'm sure you have 1,000,001 stories based around that fact.
Oh yeah, it's just people, I don't know, I guess people want to label stuff and have it in categories so they can, it just feels to me like people want to own something or be in control of it and approve it and then not have to think about it. Once you could put something in a category, then you can move past it or something and not have to be responsible for who you are and what you think about it and taking it carefully. So it's just, I don't know why people get so bent out of shape about stuff like that. And Christians are bad, but so are, like I said, so are vegans and other people. They just, I don't know. Everybody just wants to be on teams real bad, and I don't care about teams. I don't think that's the way it works. But people really, really want to be sided up and on politically. So everything's the same way. I don't know why people want to act that way. I really don't get it.
Yeah, no, it's frustrating when it's you're walling yourself off from an experience and a potential person that could just be awesome for you.
Yeah, just so that you can say we're on the same team or we're not.
Right.
I don't get it.
Right. You're either with us or you're against us. And like, of course, there's an element of that that's like there's validity in some elements of that, but that doesn't need to be your blanket statement.
That's not the good part about community and identity. There's good parts about it. There's great things about having people that you're like, but the good part about it isn't the exclusion of others. That's not the awesome thing about groups and community, I don't think.
Right. And I also, just because like the, in focusing obviously on, Christian music as a marketing tool, especially, around that time when, Tooth and Nail and Solid State, not saying that they were perpetrators of this, but there were so many things that popped up around the context of, bands calling themselves, they immediately had a built-in fan base if they said they were a Christian band. And I'll never forget like the concept of, as a kid, going into a Christian bookstore and like buying a CD for like $25 and being like, wait, but I can go to Tower and I can get this for like $16. Like, why are they charging an additional $10? Like, there's so many layers of it that was just like, even my 17-year-old brain was being like, hey, this doesn't seem right. Like, what is this?
No, it's not right, but I don't know who you blame on it, because it's just kind of the nature of power and structure and stuff like that. I guess maybe you say it this way, there aren't Christian, business, like if there's Christian entertainment, and that's an industry and a business, and that's all it is. So there's individuals can be Christians, but the record store itself is just a industry. And the worst part about it is a lot of times the Christian industries are more greedy and cutthroat than others, and that's just a fact. I mean, I don't. Somebody can disagree with me if they want to, but I don't think. My experience, especially in Christian music, is the more Christian a label or management company or booking agency is, the less ethical and more greedy they are. That's a fact to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Maybe that shouldn't be true, but I find it to be true.
No, what's the saying? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like
Yeah. And that just flows through to people. I mean, companies and profits and margins have their own thing, but it's easier to exploit Christians, and then the people are the same. So the owner or the general manager of something, they're the same. They're the same in Christian and non-Christian businesses. Only the Christian clientele is easier to exploit.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's all you need to know. People are the same.
No, for sure. There's two more things I want to hit on before I let you go. Was the you work at Mars Hill up in Seattle, correct?
I'm not on staff. I just volunteer there.
Oh, you just volunteer.
Toby at one time was on staff before he moved back to Charleston. He was on staff at Mars Hill Church, and I've been here a long time. I've been going there, and I volunteer and lead music and do other volunteer counseling, stuff like that there.
Got it. Because I mean that church in and of itself is very obviously it's revolutionary in the way that they treat a lot of their things, from like starting a record label and all this other stuff. Has it been interesting for you to attend that church and watch it grow over the past 5 to 6 years and see kind of where it's at now?
Oh yeah, I mean I guess it's like a lot of things too, where it just grows and it changes, and things change. And then like when Mars Hill started, it was super punk rock and all about music and stuff like that, and now it's just different. It's larger, and so it has to change too. So it is very interesting, and I don't like making a big deal about church and different churches or specific churches overall. Like, it's a church that I love and support and have been going to a long time.
Sure.
And I do want to resist the same as we were talking about with just people wanting to be in Christian bands. Christians even want to make their church good churches and bad churches, and then against each other, which is nuts.
Right.
So I don't want to do that about my church or anybody else's church, but I think my church is great, and it's been a really big part of my life for sure. And it's also been fun because it's changed so much and it's grown so much, and they've done and implemented so many different things that were kind of revolutionary. So I've always been attracted to that. I think of it like, at least when it started, it was very alternative to mainstream, and now it's a lot more like a mainstream kind of church,
right,
probably. But I have enjoyed being a part of it because it also started small and then did all kind of revolutionary ideas and did whatever they felt like and broke a bunch of rules, and then that's always attractive to me.
And the last thing I wanted to hit on was, just because everybody has the ability to share so much of their self and share so much of their lives, obviously online and with other strangers essentially. and because of the, all the different avenues in which you are putting yourself out there, from, the website to the podcast to the book to, the band, do you constantly have to kind of, check yourself to be like, okay, there has to be elements of my life that are obviously like private, or is that something that all kind of just like blends into one another just because you have so many different avenues in which to express yourself?
Well, my goal is to not have much of a private life. I wish I could talk about more stuff, and I wish everybody could be more open and less private. I never have been a big fan of privacy. I know that sounds silly, but I just don't. I'm not a big fan. I don't care about privacy, really. I have to respect other people. Like I would love to talk more about. I want everybody to talk more about their family. Like I like it when other people talk about the struggle with their parental relationship, and so that's a great topic to talk about. You have to, be careful not to hurt your mom's feelings too bad, or your wife's, or whatever. But I like it when people do that. So to me, it's not that big of a deal, but I want to respect other people. But I wish everybody would just loosen up. That's what I think. So if I overshare about my life or go into that a little bit or do stuff overly, then I'm kind of willing to take the hit on it to some degree, because I hope that would inspire other people to do that on the small. Everybody doesn't need to have a podcast and talk about their sexual struggles.
Right.
Everybody doesn't have to do that. But you know what? I'll do it, and then maybe somebody else will with their 15 friends, and that'll be good for them. So everybody doesn't have to broadcast to 10,000 people, but I think everybody should open up more than they do currently with 10 and 20 and 100 people. So if we can inspire that by being a little bit foolish, that's okay with me.
Do you worry about, just because obviously with the transparency and openness, there's not only just like your own selfish personal fallout, but obviously it's like stories you share that, involve other people, the, potential repercussions on like your wife being bummed or your mom or dad being bummed, like, is that something you've had to struggle with, or is that
it hasn't been bad yet, and it could. I mean, that could happen. But
you're like, there's a potential for that.
There's definitely the potential for that, but I think my family's my mom gets her feelings hurt pretty easily, but I don't have any really huge secrets about her or anything, so I anticipate she'll get her feelings hurt from time to time. And my dad doesn't care probably too much or pay attention. My wife's really cool. She also doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to what I do, so that's nice. That way she won't notice it. She doesn't listen to the podcast or anything, so
that's I like that. You're just like, hey, as long as no one else pays attention to it, like I'm good.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I don't think it's going to impact us too much. We had our old drummer Seth called into the podcast because he texted me and had a story that was like really funny. I guess it had to do with doo-doo and diarrhea, basically. So He called in. Oh, he texted me while we were podcasting. I was like, hey, just call me and tell me the story right now. And I put him on speakerphone and let him tell this, story about essentially pooping his pants on the podcast. And then he ultimately wouldn't let me air it because it said his name. He talked about it. He's a professional counselor, and it just thought it was, if his clients or his boss or something heard it, it would just be too damaging. It was really funny. It was made for a really funny story on the podcast, but so we had to cut that. So I'm bummed about that. Right. But I want to do more stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, it's like I think there's an element of pushback in regards to bad taste and professional. Yeah. If you impact a person, like, this may get you fired, I may not want to put that out there.
But the whole idea for our podcast is, if you are hanging out with your dude friends on a camping trip that you do once a year, you say a ton of distasteful things, and it would be fine. And that's just the environment that would be. And so the podcast is interesting because anybody can choose to listen to it or not. So we want to create a space that feels like the way we would talk. I'd say that it would be about like we'd talk on the tour bus. It's a bit more, it's still considerably more protected than we would talk on the tour bus, but it's closer to that. And that's what the environment we want to create. So it's just like if other people could kind of listen in and join us at that. So if I wouldn't talk that way if I was at a funeral. Right. So this is just the way I talk to my friend Toby and Joey and our friends when they call in and people we hang out with. And you have to understand that's what we're doing when you listen. So if that's uncomfortable or too rough of an environment for you, then don't listen, but don't act like that's not. Everybody has that level of people that are comfortable talking that way around. Just because you have a microphone doesn't mean now you have to become formal.
Yeah.
all of a sudden.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely that element of like, oh, this is serious now. Let's lock into this.
Yeah, and that's what makes for really boring, podcasts and broadcasts is when it's just super safe. That's not fun. Nobody's going to listen to that. Or I wouldn't want to.
Right. And especially the regurgitation of information that is pretty easily accessible in Wikipedia. Like, don't do that.
And Christianity's the worst at that. So like I said, even if we push farther and go over the line of taste, that's okay. I mean, somebody's got to do it, right?
Right. Yeah, why can't it be you guys? Well, I really appreciate you hanging out and doing this chat. There we go. There was Matt. I think it's the Southern accent. I don't know what it is, but talking to people with Southern accents is always it's fun. It just kind of puts you in that relaxed mood. Like, hey man, we're just hanging out. And like you can even hear in the interview, I try to mimic a Southern accent and fail miserably on more than one occasion. So I guess it's just not cut out for me. So I should never live in the South or try to adopt a Southern accent. And I shouldn't try to audition for Saturday Night Live as a Southern accent. So there's a lot of things I can't do. Anyways, visit propertyofzach.com, 100wordspodcast.com. The producer, that's right, I said producer. He got a raise. He also got a promotion. Tom Richfield, great dude. He's the producer. Got it? Okay. And let's talk about some future guests, all right? Yeah. So I have Brittany from Pity Sex. She's going to be on an upcoming episode. And Rob Moran from Unbroken will also be on a future episode. Just some fun people that I have coming up. And even more fun people that I have even deeper into the future. I got like almost 2 months worth of shows booked out and planned and guests scheduled and all that other fun stuff. Until next week, be safe, everybody.